Hello, viewers and learners. In the series that we have started on international relations theory, I have picked up some of the important theories for you. And today in that series, I am going to discuss with you the world systems theory by Immanuel Wallerstein. It is also an important contribution in the field of international relations. Broadly, if we have to categorize this theory, then it is considered as part of Marxist theory of international relations. World systems theory is a macro sociological perspective that seeks to explain the dynamics of the capitalist world economy. Now, it is important here to note that if we see the orientation of world systems theory, then it broadly covers the entire world. So, it's a macro perspective, it incorporates a macro perspective, and it also includes the sociological perspective to analyze the world, to the capitalist world economy. It considered the capitalist world economy as a total system. So world systems theory does not refer primarily to the geographical scope of capitalism. It means that it is not limiting itself to the geographical scope of capitalism. Rather, capitalism is also having a lot of unintended impact and consequences for the countries which are not capitalistic in nature. It means that this world system, it leaves a lot of impact on all the countries around the world, whether they are capitalistic or not. Wallerstein is the pioneer of world systems theory, which is based in part on radical dependency theories of underdevelopment in the 1950s, as well as the French Annales School of Historiography. Immanuel Wallerstein has written a seminal paper, The Rise and Future Demise of the World Capitalist System, Concepts for Comparative Analysis. It was published in the Comparative Studies in Society and History in September 1974. It was a very important article, and generally it is also referred in various readings or reference lists when we study the world systems theory. In the same year, in 1974, Wallerstein published an important book titled The Modern World System, Volume 1, Capitalist Agriculture and the Origins of the European World Economy in the 16th Century. This was Wallerstein's landmark contribution to sociological and historical thought, and it triggered numerous reactions and inspired many others to build on his ideas. So what has been laid down by Wallerstein, a kind of new perspective to look at the countries around the world and how they deal with each other, it has inspired many other scholars to work on same lines. If we see the origin, if we discuss the origin of world systems theory broadly, then the origin of the world systems theory, it can be traced back to the first systematic attempt to apply the idea of Marx to the international sphere, that is, to the critique of imperialism advanced by a number of thinkers at the start of 20th century. So when we explore the Marxist theory regarding international relations, its primary focus is on imperialism. So world systems theory and the beginning, or the scholars initially, those who have started analyzing it, so they have started analyzing the impact or the nature of imperialism. The most well-known and influential work that emerged from this debate is a pamphlet that was written by Lenin himself. It was published in 1917, and it was called Imperialism as the Highest Stage of Capitalism. Lenin accepted much of Marx's thesis, but argued that character of capitalism had changed since Marx published the first volume of Capital in 1867. Here Lenin argued that over the period of time, the nature or the key hypothesis of Marx, because of the societal conditions, change in the societal conditions, because of the change in economies, the Marxist principles or the Marxist arguments regarding the nature of international system, it has transformed, right? So ever since he has written Capital in 1867, many things have changed. Capitalism, it had entered a new stage its highest and final stage with the development of monopoly capitalism. Lenin argued that under monopoly capitalism, a two-tier structure had developed within the world economy with a dominant core exploiting a less developed periphery. With the development of a core and periphery, there was no longer an automatic harmony of interest between all workers. Now, it is contrary to the arguments given by Marx that the workers of the world they must unite. So here Lenin argued that because of the development of core and periphery, now the harmony of interest among the workers is no longer there. The bourgeoisie in the core countries could use profits derived from exploiting the periphery to improve a lot their own proletariat. In other words, the capitalists of the core could pacify their own working class through the further exploitation of the periphery. So here, and it is also one of the reasons that we see no revolution or no dissatisfaction in capitalist countries, particularly among the working class of capitalist countries. Why? Because they are getting a lot of facilities, they have higher wages, they have better working conditions, and how the developed countries were able to manage this by exploiting the peripheral countries even more. Lenin's views were developed by Latin American dependency schools, the writers of which developed the notion of core and periphery in greater depth. In particular, Raul Prebisch, he has argued that countries in the periphery were suffering as a result of what he called the declining terms of trade. He suggested that the price of manufactured goods increased more rapidly than that of raw materials. Now here the core countries again have a disadvantageous position because they primarily, the peripheral countries have a disadvantageous position because they primarily export raw materials. On the other hand, the core countries that largely deal in manufactured goods, the price of their product is going to increase manifold in comparison to the price of raw materials. Now, if we broadly see the nature of the world systems theory, it is both intellectual and political in nature. In the intellectual world, world systems theory is positioned into the field of historical sociology and economic history. In addition, because of its emphasis on development and unequal opportunities across nations, it has been embraced by developed theorists and practitioners. This combination makes the world system project both a political and an intellectual endeavor. When we see the timing of world systems theory, it is also very important, like at what time this world systems theory was given and what were the dominant trends at that time. Wallerstein's work developed at a time when the dominant approach to understanding development, modernization theory, was under attack from many fronts, and he also followed the suit. He himself acknowledges that his aim was to create an alternative explanation. So here Wallerstein argued, he emphasized that his primary purpose is to create an alternative explanation to modernization theory, which was dominant at that time. He aimed at achieving a clear conceptual break with theories of modernization and thus provide a new theoretical paradigm to guide our investigations of the emergence and development of capitalism, industrialism, and national states. So Skopol, he further said about the world systems theory or about the contribution of Wallerstein that it was a clear conceptual break, and he has given us a new perspective to look at the emergence or development of capitalism or industrialization in developed countries. Now there are certain criticisms of that modernization theory. The first criticism was the reification of the nation state as the sole unit of analysis. So modernization theory gave a lot of importance to nation state, and it considers nation state as the sole unit of analysis, and it is not giving importance to what are the terms of the relationship or the terms of exchange that are there between or across nation states around the world. Second thing is uh, assumption that all countries can follow only a single path of evolutionary development. Now it is very important here because modernization theory try to convince the entire world and other countries that there is only one singular path to economic development or say evolutionary development. It means that countries, they have no alternatives, they have no choices available, and the only choice available to them is to follow the Western countries or to accept the current world system. Third is disregard of the world historical development of transnational structures that constrain local and national development. And the fourth one is explaining in terms of ahistorical ideal types of tradition versus modernity, which are elaborated and applied to national cases. So these are some of the criticisms of modernization, and based on these criticisms, Wallerstein, he has highlighted, he has outlined his focused research agenda, like in which particular areas he want to focus and which particular aspects of world economy or international system he wants to highlight. So Wallerstein, he has outlined a major research agenda, and it is directed in 5 directions, or there are 5 major subjects. The first one is the functioning of the capitalist world economy as a system. So here Wallerstein wants to focus on how the capitalist world economy operates. Is it like in the interest of all? Is it manipulative? Is it fair to all? What are the terms and conditions of exchange between and across states, right? And whether all the countries in different parts of the world, whether they are actually getting the benefit of capitalist world economy or not. Second thing is the how and why of its origin. So here he historically wants to analyze the capitalist world economy, how it has evolved over the period of time. What are the factors or what are the conditions that contributed in its evolution? And what exactly was its purpose? Is it for the betterment of humanity? Or is it for the better of all the countries or all the people around the world? Third thing is its relations with non-capitalist structures in previous centuries. So how the present world capitalist system is connected to with the non-capitalist structures which were existing in the past. And the fourth one is comparative study of alternative modes of production. So here Wallerstein wants to explore that whether there can be any alternative modes of production other than the current world capitalist system on which the world systems theory is based. And the last one is the ongoing transition to socialism, how the countries or the countries of the world, how they can move towards socialism, what can be the path of moving towards socialism. And here he was including all the countries, not just the countries that are at the periphery or the countries that are at the semi-peripheral level. Here he was also including the countries that are at the core. So the core countries are also given a lot of importance here, and that is the reason if we see the perspective of Wallerstein of analyzing the world systems, then he was incorporating all the countries of the world, all the regions of the world, right? So he was incorporating it because he was not primarily concerned about the future of or the condition of the peripheral countries or the semi-peripheral countries. Rather, he was looking for some kind of solution, and that solution was socialism. But how socialism could replace the world systems theory, or how it could replace the capitalist structures of the world, that was his primary concern. So Wallerstein, he has outlined this major research agenda, and he wants to focus on this research agenda in future, and it can also be seen as an attempt to find an alternative to the world modernization theory. Now, another important dimension of the world systems theory is that Wallerstein, he has presented a historical analysis of modern world system. So he was not only focusing here on the present, rather he wants to historically analyze that how the present world capitalist system or the present world system it has emerged. In his book, he locates the origin of the modern world in what he called the long 16th century. And in that 16th century, he was incorporating a much larger period from around 1450 to 1670. Before that period, Western Europe was feudal in nature, and economic production, it was based almost entirely on agriculture. So before this phase of 1450 to 1670, if you see the nature of European economy or European society, then European society, it was largely feudal. There were a lot of economic disparities. Wealth was distributed unequally, right? And there was no industrialization. There was no quality world infrastructure that we see today, and their economies were largely based on the agricultural sector. Second thing is, from 1300 onwards, agricultural production fell rapidly as changes in the European climate contributed to a rapid increase in the incidence of epidemics among the peasant population. Now, it is an important milestone or a turning point in the system, economic and social system that was prevalent in Europe, because the core of their economy and society, that was the agrarian sector, agricultural sector, it was passing through a phase of transition, it was passing through a phase of rapid decline. And what was the cause of that decline? It was because of the changing climatological conditions. Those climatological conditions have a double impact. One, that they have negatively impacted the production side of agriculture. And second, it also leads to various epidemics among the peasant population. So it has created a kind of, you can say, crisis in the European societies, and they have to find an alternative to that crisis. It was not until the 1500 that Europe moved towards the establishment of a capitalist world economy in which production was oriented towards exchange in the market rather than seasonal consumptions. Those who produced goods earned less than their value, and the driving force of capitalism became the endless accumulation of material goods. So from 1500 and onwards, a massive change can be seen in European societies. Now here, the agricultural sector, it was gradually replaced by the capitalist world economy. Now it was no longer a kind of, you can say, a question of production and consumption. Rather, now European societies, they emerge as a market that consumed, and their consumption is not seasonal in nature. It means that they were not dependent on the agricultural sector for their consumption patterns. And one more thing that happened is that in the agrarian sectors, those who used to produce, generally they did not get adequate value of their produce. While in the new system, those who produced, right, so those who produce in, say, the factories or in the major production units, industrial sector, so they are getting lot of money, or you can say that they were earning lot of profits, right? So they were earning lot of profit which is not even valid. And the driving force, and it became the driving force of capitalism, because it leads to the endless accumulation of material goods. So in a way we can argue here that from 1500 onwards there has been a massive change in European societies that leads to the emergence of a capitalist world economy, where the accumulation of material goods concentrated in the hands of few people within few countries. Economic growth in the new era entailed the expansion of the geographical scope of the market, the development of different forms of labor control, and the rise of strong state in Europe. So because of the economic growth, lot many changes came in their societies. For example, it leads to the expansion of, it leads to the geographical expansion of their market. So now they are no longer limited to their own territorial space. So whatever that they produce, they need new markets for selling their produce, right? So they were looking for some new markets around the world. So it leads to the geographical expansion of their market. Another important thing that happen is that it leads to various kind of mechanisms to control the labor. It means how to manage the labor, what percentage of profit can be shared with the labor, what can be the working conditions of the labor, right? What can be the laws, rules, and regulations through which labor or the working class will be managed. So that was another important impact of this new era. And third thing is that it leads to the rise of strong states in Europe. Why it leads to the rise of strong states in Europe? There is a particular reason, because now there is a lot of competition among European states. So internally, first they have to curb all the challenges. For that, again, they require a strong military, a strong army. Then in the outside world, in different markets, they have to compete with their rivals. So in order to compete with their rivals, again they need a very strong army, a very well trained army, because now they require a kind of army that can fight in all kind of terrains, which are not even usual. I mean, in Europe they were very well versed with the kind of terrain that is there or the nature of war that was there. But when you have to fight, say, a war in Africa, or when you have to, say, fight a war in Latin America or in Asia, you have to fight in an altogether different kind of terrain, right? So you may deal with the very unusual kind of resistance, and you will face a lot of competition. So for this, I mean, all these factors, economic growth and growth of capitalism and material accumulation by the Western countries, it leads to the emergence of strong states in Europe. It subsequently expanded to encompass the entire globe. So gradually this particular trend, it engulfed the entire world. The driving force behind this seemingly was relentless process of expansion and incorporation has been capitalism, and it has been defined by Wallerstein as a system of production for sale in a market for profit and appropriation of this profit on the basis of individual or collective ownership. So gradually the entire world, they have started following the new world system, which is based on capitalism, or it will not be wrong if we call it a capitalist world system. In that kind of world, the major driving force behind capitalism, or behind the state that are at the core of capitalism, was to expand it further, to expand it to the areas which are not covered by it as of now. So they were looking for new markets. They have to expand or increase their productions. They also have to increase their profits. All these were the guiding force, right? So the European countries, they entered in a kind of, say, an expansion spree of the world system. Within the context of this system, all the institutions of the social world are continually being created and recreated. Furthermore, and crucially, it is not only the elements within the system which change. So here, if we see, then within the main context of this system, many institutions of the social world, they have been created and recreated. It means that a lot of changes has come in the world. And those changes came not only in their economy, they also came in their society. They also came in their political systems. They also came in their political values. They also came in their institutions, political processes, right? Even how people think. So a lot of changes has come, and many things, many political institutions, they were created and recreated over the period of time. But the core element within all of them broadly remains the same. It means that the world system largely remain unaffected from all the kind of changes that were coming internally within a state. So this is a kind of, you can say, a brief historical introduction of the world system. We'll discuss it further in the next class. Thank you.